Vienna at the beginning of the 20th century, a city of apparent calm and contentment. But it was also the world of Schoenberg and the painters Klimt, Kokoschka and Schiele, artists who projected a feeling of torture and impending doom. Viennese modernism was the culmination of a reaction against the way people lived and worked, and against their attitudes.
Everything about our 1,000-year-old Austrian monarchy seemed rooted in eternity. The state itself the ultimate guarantor of continuity. Everything in this great realm had its fixed, immovable place, and in the highest place of all, the aged emperor. But should he die, one knew, or thought one knew, that another would take his place and nothing would change in all this carefully planned order. Anything radical, anything violent, seemed impossible in this age of reason.
Viennese taste at the turn of the century reinforced this atmosphere of permanence. Painting was still dominated by the spirit of Hans Mackart, the wealthiest 19th century society artist. Although Mahler was active as composer and conductor, the Viennese didn't care for his music. They preferred the more comfortable music of Brahms, Lehar, and Johann Strauss. It was the buildings of Vienna which most proclaimed unshakable faith in tradition, especially these buildings along the Ringstrasse, built by order of the Emperor Franz Joseph in the 1850s and 60s.
If you walk along the Ringstrasse, you feel as if you're in the middle of a real carnival. Everything masked, everything disguised. Life has become too serious for that kind of thing. We want to look life in the face. We, the working people of today, ought to be ashamed to live in the style of the princes and patricians of yesterday. We think that is a swindle. The future is blooming all around us, but we're still rooted in the past. We must shake off the world of that past, which long since faded, chokes our souls with its decaying foliage. We must be as the present.
Behind the imperial facade, that present was already full of tension, which was to culminate in the First World War. What form did these tensions take? Georg Eisler is a Viennese painter. He was taught by Kokoschka, and his father, Hans Eisler, was a pupil of Schoenberg.
There was the emergence of the labor movement, which was taking place very rapidly at that time, the polarization of society, the poor were beginning to find voice, the enormous centrifugal powers of the various nationalisms springing out on all the corners of the Austrian Empire, which were already dragging the whole very precarious setup apart. And amongst highly sensitive people, and amongst these must definitely be counted people like Schoenberg and Kokoschka, whatever their political views were, they could feel there was something nasty coming their way.
As always in Vienna, the coffee houses were the centers of discussion. Oskar Kokoschka, soon to become the leading modernist painter, described the atmosphere.
Over a cup of coffee, my friends and I, all about 20 years old, used to discuss the things closest to our hearts. Ideas akin to those of the French Revolution were waking again. Murderous attacks on crowned heads and ministers were becoming a matter of course. Students demonstrated outside the university, workers outside the parliament. The world we knew was moving towards its end.
Vienna was a city of ominous contrasts. In the inner city, many people lived in wealth and comfort. In the outer districts, there were thousands of workers who didn't even own a bed. There was an enormous Jewish population in Vienna at a time when anti-Semitism was rife and German nationalism was a growing force. Fashionable Austro-Hungary gave the impression of high moral tone, and yet prostitutes were an institution in Vienna, visited by sons of the most respectable families. Repressed sexual impulses were a central feature of the theories and psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud.
The sicknesses he dispensed for were the sicknesses of an oversensitized section of the middle classes. Others thought that healthy exercise and long walks in the forest were much more helpful than Freud, and it was rather considered obscene, something you should be rather ashamed of if you need help.
This traditional Viennese facade was increasingly under attack during the first decade of the century. The modernists wanted to confront the Viennese with a vision of life as it really was beneath the surface, to drag them into the 20th century. Even the buildings themselves reflected this change. This is Otto Wagner's Post Office Savings Bank, built in 1904. Among the most revolutionary features was the facade of white marble plates, held in place by 17,000 bolts.
Modern forms must correspond to new materials, contemporary needs, if they are to be suitable for mankind today. They must embody our own development, our democracy, our self-confidence, our idealism. They must take into account vast technical and scientific advances of our age, as well as the practical requirements of society. That is self-evident.
Although Viennese traditionalists reacted against Otto Wagner's work, they were much more outraged by the buildings of a younger architect, Adolf Loos. Loos developed the rejection of imperial style into a hatred of ornament in general. His interior for the Café Museum, where Schoenberg's circle used to meet, was so bare that it was nicknamed the Café Nihilismus. But in 1909, just opposite one of the entrances to the Emperor's palace, Loos put up the house which provoked the fiercest criticism.
There isn't a trace of anything Viennese about the new house. The ground floor and mezzanine of the noblest material, expensive marble, and above it all a bare plaster wall without a shadow of ornament, punctuated by tasteless window openings.
The Emperor refused ever again to use the palace entrance opposite the Loos house. But the most violent revolution in the Viennese arts was led by the painter Gustav Klimt. In 1897, Klimt headed the Vienna Secession, a breakaway group from the Academy influenced by Art Nouveau. Then, around the turn of the century, the first scandal broke.
Medicine, Klimt's latest work of genius. Now I beg you, try and think of something sensible in front of this picture. I can't. The walls are revolving, and so is my stomach. Oh, help! Where's the emergency exit? Oh, thank God it's passed. Medicine has had its effect.
This is an old photograph of one of the paintings commissioned for Vienna University, which were later destroyed in a fire. This nude was the first of many in Klimt's paintings which upset the traditionalists.
This time it is Danae who shows off her charms, but not standing, nor sitting, nor lying down, no, much too ordinary. This Danae is rolled up like a bundle of dirty washing. And in this position she allows us to admire her thigh and half her bosom.
But despite these criticisms, Klimt was a highly successful painter. In the same year, he exhibited The Kiss, the culmination of his decorative Art Nouveau style. It was immediately purchased for the Austrian nation. The Kiss and Danae were shown at the first of two art shows which turned out to be a landmark of Viennese modernism, the Kunstschau of 1908 and 1909.
Exhibitions at that time played a very dominant role in society. It was a thing you were expected to go and see. It was a sort of social center for the time of its running. And they thought that this was going to come up again with the same mixture as before, sort of floral ornamentation, gracious furniture, and lo and behold, there were some very nasty things lurking there, which were not the things of Klimt, but which were the sort of early works of Kokoschka, which for the first time showed the Viennese what they really looked like. At least they found themselves deeply insulted by this form of portraiture, by this form of showing a world which was not very nice, which was putrefying.
The Kunstschau certainly has its cage of wild beasts. The wildest of them all is Kokoschka, a handsome young man and a gifted eccentric. He will be torn to pieces, but that will be good for him and clear the air.
The people whom he portrays look as if they are suffering from repulsive physical and, of course, mental diseases.
Lemurs covered in a soup of milky pus, blood and sweat, thickened with ointment.
Adolf Loos, the architect, was impressed by Kokoschka's work at the Kunstschau and sought commissions for him. One of the first was to paint a biologist, August Forel.
Suddenly he seemed ancient. Myriads of small wrinkles appeared, like the documents of a man's life. His face fascinated me. The eye grew clearer. I searched it profoundly, for it was the eye of a seeker wont to see beyond the appearance of things. It was the window of a brain whose intelligence I was trying to portray. What used to shock people in my portraits was that I tried to intuit from the face, from its play of expressions and from gestures, the truth about a particular person.
Kokoschka wasn't only a painter. The work which most offended Viennese taste at the second Kunstschau in 1909 was his play, Murderer, Hope of Women.
I designed a poster expressing the content of the play. The man is blood red, the color of life. But he is lying dead in the lap of a woman who is white, the color of death. As I had intended, it sent the Viennese into paroxysms of rage.
Beat it back, the evil plague! Senseless yearning from horror to horror, endless circling in the void, procreation without birth, collapsing sun, reeling space, end of those who praised me. Oh, your pitiless word! He cannot live, nor die. He is all white.
I wasn't the only one treading dangerous waters. The whole world seemed to be in the grip of an existential malaise, no longer believing in the possibility of individual action or the control of one's own future.
Open the gate, I must go to him! Pale man, are you afraid? Do you know fear? Are you merely asleep? Are you awake? Can you hear me? Sighing wind. Time. On time. Solitude, peace, and hunger confuse me. Worlds swing by, no air. The long night falls. So much life pours from the split. So much force pours from the gate. He is as pale as a corpse. I'm taming a wild beast in the cage. Does your song howl with hunger? You, aren't you dying?
Stars and moon. Woman, dreaming or waking, I saw the bright radiance of a singing being. In my breathing, much that is dark is unraveled. Mother, you lost me here.
Don't forget me.
Cankerous thought clings to my brow.
It is your wife.
A sliver of shy light.
Husband, sleep for me.
Peace, peace, delusion, leave me. I'm afraid.
I won't let you live. You weaken me. I'll kill you. You bind me. I caught you and you are holding me. Let go of me. You're gripping me as if with iron chains suffocated. Let go. Help. I lost the key that held you fast.
Following the performance of my play, I was called a degenerate artist, bourgeois beta, corrupter of youth, and common criminal. All the expressions that came into common use in Hitler's day. So I had my head shaved to look the part.
One of Kokoschka's staunchest supporters was Arnold Schoenberg, whom Kokoschka painted.
Kokoschka is one of those strong natures who can afford to express themselves, aware that by doing so they are making their contribution to the expression of everyone and everything, the universe itself.
In 1909, Schoenberg wrote Erwartung, Expectation, which offers some striking parallels to Kokoschka's play. Schoenberg described it as a nightmare. It's a psychosexual battle between a woman and her lover, whom she has found dead in the forest. These pictures are by Schoenberg himself. He had taken up painting the previous year, encouraged and taught by a young artist, Richard Gerstl. Gerstl committed suicide, never having exhibited his paintings, and he hated the decorative style of Klimt. Egon Schiele, on the other hand, was deeply influenced by Klimt, and he too shocked the Viennese with pictures of death, decay, and sexuality.
That these young painters prefer to choose obscene things and actions for their subject matter can, in the end, scarcely be held against them, for they are simply following in the steps of those they imitate. some of whom are already grand old men. They have seized upon the idea of going through the crisis of puberty before an invited audience.
The Viennese took a long time to recognize a more important quality in Schiele's paintings: compassion. This is the family. Death and the Maiden. Dead mother.
I would like to get out of Vienna as soon as possible. How ugly everything there is. Vienna is full of shadows. A black city.
Schiele was voicing the frustrations of many of the modernists. He himself stayed in Vienna, but Kokoschka went to Berlin in 1910 to work for Der Sturm, a magazine which published his drawings and his play Murder, a Hope of Women. Schoenberg went to Berlin the following year, leaving his pupils Berg and Webern to carry on the battle. Klimt stayed in Vienna, but stopped exhibiting his paintings. And Adolf Loos received no more public commissions. But it wasn't just the newness of the modernists which disturbed the Viennese.
I think one of the main characteristics they all had in common was a striving for truth. Loos wanted to strip away the superfluous details of ornamentation of the buildings and return architecture to a statement of fundamental truths about masses, about blocks, about forms. Kokoschka stripped away the sort of attributes of social position as exemplified by facial expression to find a truth in a face, a truth which was not part of social convention. Schoenberg wanted to get a truthful relationship to music, that people should not be able to sit back and regard music as a background noise to illustrate their various pleasant moods and thoughts whilst they were listening to it.
I believe that a real composer writes music for no other reason than that it pleases him. I have scarcely ever taken any account of whether my works were liked or not. Those who compose because they want to please others and have audiences in mind are not real artists.
The Viennese will forgive anything except greatness. It makes them uncomfortable. The very name Vienna seems inseparable from charm, merriment, and nonentity. What will become of us? Anything at all? Is there any future for the city?
While Vienna tried to maintain the facade of its imperial past, the modernists provoked fear and hostility by exploring the tensions beneath the surface. It was almost as if they were sensing the turmoil which was soon to tear Europe apart, as if their work expressed a vision of horrors to come.